fans. Welcome to another edition of the Buffoon Sports Talk. We've got 2/4 of Circus with us today. I'm your host, Troy Alexander. With me, welcome back, Phil Melangi.
Hey, what's good, everybody? How's everyone doing?
So, before we get into this, I want to call it a diverse episode because we've never talked about this sport / entertainment before. But before we get into that, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was fantastic, man. Spent time with family, spent time with some friends, ate a lot, gained a few pounds, back at it at the gym so I can lose that, what I gained over Thanksgiving. But man, it was good. How was yours?
Probably the same, except probably the difference is I got blitzed. like, like, dude,
Hey,
I was making
I saw the
like I
photos.
was
I
making
saw the
margaritas.
photos.
You saw them?
Yeah, I saw them.
I was making margaritas. I had wine. I had champagne, plus all the food. So, dude, I was pretty hammered. I'm not gonna lie for Thanksgiving. So overall, it was a nice Thanksgiving. Spent time with family like you, ate a lot and drank a lot. So, uh, quick question: how are you on pumpkin pie?
Pumpkin pie. So I don't mind pumpkin pie, but I gotta add a lot of whipped cream to it.
Yeah, I feel like pumpkin pie is like that weird dessert that you're like, yeah, it's good, but only on Thanksgiving or only around the holidays.
Exactly. I wouldn't go out of my way to the store. Like let's say I have a sweet tooth, I wouldn't go out of my way to get a pumpkin pie. Like I would get something else besides the pumpkin pie, but like it just feels like I'm missing something on Thanksgiving.
Right. And it's like, why the hell are you going to get a pumpkin pie instead of a cheesecake? Like, why would someone ever do that? But okay, okay. So before I start talking about all of these sweets that I love and that you love, because I know we're both sweet tooths over here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna get into a topic, like I said when we first started this thing, that we've never done before. But it's crazy that we've never done this one before because we're such big fans. I mean, I'm not really that current of a fan, but I'm more old school as far as it. And the topic today is the WWF, but with a little twist because arguably, but probably not arguably, the greatest wrestler / character of all time just retired less than 2 weeks ago, like officially retired, in being The Undertaker. I know he is miles away your favorite wrestler and character of all time. So that is one of the biggest reasons I wanted you on this episode. And you haven't been with us in a long time, so I wanted to welcome you back with this awesome episode. So when you let's start it out this way. When you think of The Undertaker, so many things come to mind, and we'll dive into some of them because there's too many. What's the first word that you think of when someone tells you The Undertaker? Go.
I wouldn't say one single word, but a word or a statement that I would say is measuring stick. He's the
Okay.
measuring stick of WWE for 30 plus odd years. And I think a lot of people don't understand that that was Vince McMahon's like right hand man, even during the Attitude Era. But I know a lot of us, people on our age and our friend groups, like, they all watch the Attitude Era and they're like, oh, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, things like that. And don't get me wrong, they're such vital parts of the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars between WCW. But people forget that Undertaker played a huge role during that time, to the point he ended up changing his character because he needed to be more versatile. He needed to be more on the mic. He needed to be more mouthy because there's that attitude, and people don't realize that. But if I had I couldn't do just a word, but if I had to say like a statement, it was measuring stick, because if you can measure up to the Undertaker and he liked you, you could have a very successful career in the WWE.
You, you know, something else that like that I think a lot of people forget about, like when like some people just like, I feel like a lot of people, not a lot, I don't know, but like people watch wrestling because of the entertainment, but it's like, and that is what it is, but there's so many times in the business where one guy has to be a certain way or play a certain way slash role for the other guy to be successful. And like, for instance, when I think of Kane, I don't think there would have been a Kane without the Undertaker in the first place. And and Kane and Kane played such a big part. He's another guy that played another huge part in um, the Attitude Era and the era right after that. So without certain guys, other guys wouldn't be here, and that's something I feel like is missed a lot.
Yeah, and Undertaker would be the first person to tell you that he could not do this on his own. He needed a Kane to allow his character to continue on, because they have like one of the best storylines ever. It actually one of the longest storylines ever, because it's the brother. They fight against each other, they team up against each other. It was a great thing that kept on many years. The storyline continued on for many years, and it helped Kane, it helped the Undertaker, and the Undertaker was the first person to tell you that Kane played a huge vital role in Undertaker's own career. And then we also got to add on Paul Bearer as well. He played a huge role in in
Mm-hmm.
in Undertaker and with Kane. That, not saying people overlook that, but it's not a fun topic to talk about in a sense. But Paul Bearer played such a huge role for the Undertaker, and to your point, like you were mentioning, I don't mean to go in circles, but to your point that you're mentioning is that he had to have help to allow his career to go on to 30 years. And yeah, it played a huge role with it.
Right, and it's like Paul Bear's like the dad that like was the dad of both. It's like I always wondered, like, how is this guy like 5'8" and these dudes are like 6'9"? Like, like he's he's the dad, right? But I mean, how tall was their mom? We never got a picture of their mom. Was their mom like 7'5"? Like, but um, no, like when I think of like, it's almost hard to like start with the Undertaker. It's like, okay, when I think of him, first match that comes to mind, Hell in a Cell with Mankind, right? I mean, I know there's tons of other matches, but for me, I mean, I was watching that at like what year was that? I think it was
98.
98, or was it 99? It was
98.
98. Okay, so I was 6 years old when I was watching that, and I remember that match to this day. I was sitting on my aunt's couch watching that match back in Connecticut, and like when he threw Mankind off the cell, it was like, I mean, I don't even know if you see that type of thing. It's
you
like,
you don't, especially to today's age of wrestling, you don't see that. Obviously everyone's a little bit smarter, but during the Monday Night Wars, unfortunately, you had to do something drastic, and it wasn't Undertaker who recognized that. That was Mankind who recognized that, and
right.
he knows he needed to do something big to get the WWE over during the Monday Night Wars, and that was just part of it, and that wasn't planned. It kind of just happened, and he asked Take to throw him off, and he said, "You sure?" If you can go back and watch the film, but you can kind of see them like not at a standstill, but you can tell they're kind of, well, obviously with wrestlers they have the long hair, and that's how they kind of disguise when they're communicating with each other, and you can kind of tell they're somewhat communicating. And Mankind said, "Throw me off," and Take said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes, do it," and he did it. And that's probably the, for just like a generic wrestler, fan, or just an average wrestling fan, I should probably say, that's probably the match everyone remembers with The Undertaker. And in my personal opinion, it's definitely top three, but I wouldn't put it as my number one or number two best matches of all time from Taker. But it was one of those, but in the grand scheme of things for WWE, it was the match that had to happen.
Right. And like I don't think that's like by far like his best match. For me that's the one I remember the most, but for me I feel like the most memorable is I want to say the Inferno match with him and Kane, because I wasn't that the very first Inferno match.
Yeah, it was the first, and there wasn't many more after that. But yeah, they that was the first match, was the Inferno one with Kane and Taker, when Kane lit or got his hand lit on fire.
Yeah. And I mean, for obvious reasons, there hasn't been any more after that. And the characters are so fitting for the Inferno match. But
I,
like,
I think you're right. I think it has to be based off of the character, because it only happened a few times, and then I believe there was another one that happened back in, I would say 2015, with Kane and a current wrestler by the name of Bray Wyatt. I think there was an Inferno match, I think like 2015, 2014, 2015. But you're right. It's based off a character, just like somewhat like a Buried Alive match. Like, you wouldn't want to be honest, you wouldn't be interested in a Buried Alive match with, let's say, back in the 90s with, or late 90s, early 2000s, with Jeff Hardy and X-Pac. Like, you wouldn't care for it.
right.
There's no, it doesn't mesh well. But let's say you add Taker, and then you do like Kane, or you do Mankind, um, Triple H. If you add those type of characters to it, oh, that match goes up like this.
Right. And it's like, I feel like there's a lot of different things that separate a quote unquote wrestler. Like, so my favorite wrestler of all time is Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's not because he was a fantastic wrestler, he had a ton of moves, but it was because of his character. It's the middle finger. I don't give a damn who you are. I'm gonna drink beer in front of you. I'm gonna whoop my boss's ass. Just that type of stuff was funny. And then you look at The Rock, same thing. He wasn't a great wrestler. The Rock and Stone Cold had like maybe 3 or 4 moves tops, but it was their character and their mic skills that made them so memorable. When I look at The Undertaker, he wasn't really on the mic much as like the Undertaker that we all know him as. It was really when he got to the American Badass was when he started to be on the mic more, and we'll get to the American Badass segment. But for me, what defined Undertaker was I feel like he is the best wrestler just of all time. He had so many different moves. He even added more when he became the American Badass, and he can even talk on the mic when he wanted to. So I just feel like overall Taker's the GOAT. I gotta say it.
Yeah, I wish Jake was on the podcast, because we actually were talking about this probably two years ago, and I sat down with him, because we're avid wrestling fans. He doesn't watch current wrestling, but we like to talk about the past and whatnot, because that's what him and I bonded over as kids growing up, and then you and I as well, Troy, that and other things. But um, I sat down with him. I said, "Dude, Taker's the GOAT." And he's like, "No, Taker's not the GOAT." And I'm like, "No, there's a reason why you have wrestlers like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, even Ric Flair, which arguably is probably the greatest wrestler ever, has actually come out and said, no, Taker is the greatest wrestler of all time." And it's those points that you just mentioned. He's a 6'10" guy who's very, who walks on top of the ropes, you know, jumps over the ropes, um, has a bunch of different moves. He changes up his moves as his career progresses. Um, he's a great wrestler. Like you mentioned, when he switched over to American Badass, his mic skills are really, really, got really good after a while. And it's hard to argue someone who's been in the business for 30 some odd years. And I get it. Some people be like, well, he didn't really wrestle a whole lot, you know, after 2011. Yeah, that's true. He only had like 27 matches from 2011 to 2020. But, you know, still 30 some odd years, a streak that will never ever come close. You know, it's very impressive. And honestly, if you sat there and you're like, no, you can't convince me, Undertaker's not the GOAT, that's fine. Your Mount Rushmore, you have to have. There's just absolutely no if, ands, but about it. You have to at this point.
Okay, right. And okay, real quick, what's your Mount Rushmore? Real quick.
My Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, just real quick.
Okay, if I had to put a Mount Rushmore right now, and this is me just not sitting here thinking really deeply about it. This is just going off the cuff. I would put Undertaker on it. I would put Ric Flair on it. I would put Hulk Hogan on it, and then I would have to put Stone Cold Steve Austin on it. And that's probably my top 4 Mount Rushmores. And there's many reasons why they're on it. And you know, Ric Flair is obviously Ric Flair. You know, he's a 16-time world champion. Hulk Hogan was just dominant during the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. Stone Cold Steve Austin, probably the biggest draw that we've ever seen an individual pull in wrestling history. And then Taker, just the longevity. So they all have their own class in a sense, but you know, that's probably my Mount Rushmore. What's yours? And real quick, anyone who knows Taker during his time on the road, if he wasn't drinking beer and he was drinking hard liquor, it was Jack Daniels. So I poured myself a little Jack Daniels because of this episode. I'm going to take it right now. But while you're talking, like, what's your Mount Rushmore? I'm quite interested in hearing this.
So, real quick, if I actually had Jack at my house, I would be drinking. I'd probably be on like my second or third glass right now. But the only thing I have at my house right now is tequila, and I'm not really feeling a margarita. But my Mount Rushmore is exceedingly close to yours, and I was 3 out of 4 are the same as yours, which is Taker, Stone Cold, and Ric Flair. That fourth one was, I understand how dominant Hogan was, but the dude had like 1 or 2 moves, man. And it's like, you can say the same thing about Ric Flair. He had the figure 4 leg lock, but like, it's just, man, it's tough for me to put a guy in there that only has like 1 or 2 moves. If I didn't put Hogan in my 4th spot, I'd put The Rock. I
He's a
and you can even argue the people elbow, the rock bottom, and then he stole the sharpshooter from Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. So I know, and the little mini spine buster, I know, but
for me, I can't argue that, and that's what makes the Attitude Era so special, is that you had 2 generational wrestlers. Like, you'll never come across that ever again, where you have 2. They're more than just superstars. In
right.
some people's eyes, they consider them, like, I don't like saying this, but like godlike in a sense. You'll never come across that ever again in wrestling, where you have that type of stardom on the same roster. It just won't happen again. So I can't, when you say The Rock, I can't sit there and say you're wrong, because I see the reasons why you'd put him on there. He's, but yeah, I can't argue it, but I'll probably stick to mine just because Hogan was just, when you think of wrestling in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, you think of Hulk Hogan. He was the face of it. And if Mount Rushmore exceeded to 5 to even 6, I would put The Rock on there, but I would also put John Cena, because he was the face for WWE for many, many years.
Right, and for those same reasons, I can't even argue Hogan being on your Mount Rushmore. I mean, but that's neither here nor there, but it's a toss up. I feel like, but
Hey, if you guys like,
so
if
okay.
hold 1 second, if you guys like our discussions that we're talking about, please leave a comment below. And if you want us to get into like discussions about like the best wrestler of all time or like our top 10 list or anything like that, if you guys are digging this, feel free to comment on there. And if we see some traction, shit, we'll do it. I think it's a
Hell
fun
yeah, we will.
conversation.
Hell yeah, because we can even make a top 10 list, and that would actually be really hard. I would need to full on need to get a pen and paper and like scale these guys because man, that would be oof. There's been a lot. There's been a lot.
And if you guys have been
And
following
there's been a
us,
lot of defining.
yeah, and if you guys have been following us, we've done top 10 lists for like top 10 NBA players or top 10 like NBA players under the age of 23, and then I think we did a couple wide receivers ones, the greatest of all time wide receivers, and then the top 10 current wide receivers. That's stuff that's fun because no list of ours is ever going to be the same, and that's what's great about it because there's great talking points behind it. So if you guys are digging that, let us know. We'll be more than happy to do that.
Heck yeah, for sure, you guys. I mean, top 10 lists are really fun. So let us know what you guys think about those, and we will definitely get at that. But
I'm sorry. I know
um,
I know we got kind of off topic, but let's get back to Take. This
yeah,
episode's for him.
yeah. So let's let's go past the Attitude Era and head to my favorite era of Undertaker, which is the American Badass. No, I'm just kidding, guys. I'm totally kidding. I hated the American Badass. Like, I hated it so much. I, I. It's just like, how can you go from super silent dead man Undertaker to badass on a motorcycle with a bandana and with a large cape on? I'm just like, I liked new moves that he added, but I couldn't stand the character Phil.
So
I couldn't stand it.
so can I talk about it real quick?
Of course, no, the floor is yours.
So and I was a huge fan of the American Badass, Big Evil. Um, I, that was probably when I was a kid. That was probably my favorite time was when he was the American Badass. As I grew older and YouTube became more popular, I can watch more old school wrestling. I fell more into like, okay, I really like the Deadman era. Like that's definitely my favorite, no questions about it. But as a kid, growing up, like I love that American badass mentality. And think of it like this: like he debuted in 1990 Survivor Series when the Million Dollar Man, debuted him,
Yeah.
and he kept that going. And he did a little changes here and there. He went from the Dead Man to Lord of Darkness, and then he did the Ministry, and it was all good. But if anyone's like watched the recent documentary with Undertaker, he talks about how he needed to make a change, like especially during the Monday Night Wars. Everyone was very vocal. You had Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had Triple H, you had obviously The Rock. You had a bunch of people that are very, very vocal, and you had to. Not only was he competing against WCW, but in your own company, you have to compete with everyone around you, and you have to mesh with everyone around you. So you have to change. You had to change your character in a sense. And to his point of view, this is not my opinion, but to his point of view, he felt like the character was starting to become stale because he was very limited on what he can do. And during a time where you're literally fighting, the Monday Night Wars, you had to make some sort of drastic change. And I think at that time it was the right change because it gave a break in a sense, and it showed who Undertaker was, because that was more Mark Calloway than it was the Dead Man, for example. And that's him. He loves bikes. That's how he dressed. He played himself in a sense. And I think it was the right opportunity. And I think that actually elevated his career overall, because I think because of that change, he became a lot better on the mic. Like you mentioned, he added a lot more, you know, arsenal to his move set. It revolutionized him, so that when he did convert back to the Deadman, at least for the first year, he kind of brought that American Badass persona with him for the rest of his career. So I know you're not a fan of it, but I think it was what was needed at that time. What's your opinion on it? Like, what did you not like about it? I know you've made comments in the past like, oh, fake biker gang, blah blah, and I laugh at that because he truly does love bikes. I'm sure he owns a shit ton. I don't know exactly how much, but that's more Mark Calloway than it is Undertaker.
I don't know, man. I just feel like the rolling into the arena on a bike, coming out to the ring, like having to drive the bike around the whole arena, like around the whole ring, I'm sorry, was like so unnecessary. And then the keep rolling, 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 rolling. I'm just like, really? Like, you look like a douche, man. But like, but like,
I loved it. As a kid, I ate that up.
but like, I know so many people love the character, and just like the bandana and like the glasses, like, dude, take your glasses off, man. Like, I don't know. I understand that's who he is as a person, but well, not we, they play certain characters because it's part of the job. It's acting. So for me, it's like, why do you have to be yourself? Like, that's what makes it fun, is when there's someone different. You're acting. It's like, man, I can't think of like an exact word to pinpoint why I didn't like it as much. I mean, I liked this move, like the last ride, dude. I love that's a sweet special, man. Like,
Yeah,
it's more than just a power bomb, dude. I'm gonna lift you up as high as I can, as high as I can get you in the
which
air and
is
throw
high
you on
because
your.
he's a tall guy, so his
Oh,
arms are
yeah,
long, so that that person that's taking the last ride is up there.
yeah. Then I go back, and as much as the hypocrite as I'm gonna sound right now, I mean, I go back. I don't watch promos with the American Badass. God no, I can't do it because I'll just get annoyed. But like, I'll watch old clips of him like as the American Badass, just like last riding people. And I actually just watched the one where he tombstone The Rock on top of a limo as the American Badass. That was
but
hilarious.
but that change, I think, what made it special in a sense, because like for that example, like when he tombstone someone, because after he made the transition from Deadman to the American Badass and then eventually converted to Big Evil, when he tombstones someone, you're like, whoa, he's pulling out everything he possibly can to beat this person. And I know which one you're talking about, when he tombstoned The Rock on the limo, because it was during that rivalry between him and I think Kurt Angle eventually got mixed into it,
Mhm.
and he truly disliked The Rock. So when he did it, and it's probably perfectly planned, like it's good wrestling psychology, but like when he pulled out the tombstone, you sat there and you're like, whoa, he does not like The Rock. The fact that he's pulling out old school wrestling moves, because he didn't do the tombstone very often when he transitioned. It was kind of rare in a sense. Like I know he
Okay.
did it to The Rock, and I know he did it to Ric Flair to beat him at WrestleMania 18. But like when he did that, you're like, whoa. But go on.
Well, a few things. I don't mean to get sidetracked, but I love The Rock's reactions to like specials, like when he'll be on like the mat like this, then he'll go like that. He'll just like twitch real quick.
He that man, you can criticize him all you want, but like he sold a Stone Cold Stunner so
Oh,
well. Did he
yeah.
oversell it? Absolutely. But like but you loved that he oversold it. Like you loved it how dramatic he made it.
Yes, it's amazing watching his oversells, man. I love his oversells. And then the last thing of that, he actually, so the Undertaker, I didn't know this. The Undertaker actually didn't like Dwayne Johnson. or he didn't like The Rock, like the character?
I think I heard that before too. I don't know much about it. I didn't read into it, but I've seen articles pop up him mentioning that he didn't like the Dwayne Johnson. I, I think
Hmm.
I think he liked The Rock because The Rock was such a huge key of the Monday Night Wars, and he's a businessman. He's he has a good wrestling philosophy, and he saw what The Rock was doing, and he loved it, and he's he's the leader of the locker room. He People don't know this, but he kind of has a say of like what goes on, what doesn't go on. You know, like for example, the Bret Hart screw job that happened with him. People don't know he was involved in that after it happened because he was not happy how business happened after that. But yeah, but anyways, I'm kind of getting sidetracked, so continue on.
No, man, it's. I mean that's pretty much what this episode is, man. We're just reminiscing about Undertaker's career. I mean, his legacy, what he means to the current WWE, what he means to the past. I mean, this is just putting Undertaker up on a pedestal because, in our opinion, he's the greatest of all time. So let's just take the time to just talk about anything else that comes to mind before we close this out. I mean,
I was
there, like I said, we could talk about this for hours.
Well, hold on. Then let's do this. Then I know we briefly talked about the Hell in Cell match, but I think it'd be cool if we quickly talk about like what are some of our favorite matches ever. From the the Deadman. Like what's I'll throw it at you first. Like what's your favorite match ever from Undertaker?
How can anyone not say that one of the best matches of all time isn't Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, right? I
Which
mean,
which one? For me, it's the first one.
okay, so help me remember what's what because I remember there was a match. I believe it was at WrestleMania, but I could be wrong there. And it was the one where like Taker tombstoned him like 3 times or something like that in order to pin him.
So yeah, so there's two outings that Take had with Shawn Michaels, and what Taker have said during interviews is that his personal favorite match of all time is his ones with Shawn Michaels. I'm guessing it's
Yeah.
probably WrestleMania 25, which is the first time they met, and that's one of my favorite matches. I recommend anyone who hasn't seen it to go and see it and just sit there. And if you have, so I have the WWE Network, and the reason I have it is because not necessarily like what's going on with current. I do somewhat follow still, but I love going back and watching old stuff. I really do. And if you have the WWE Network, watch some of the segments that happened prior before 25, like the lead up to it, the storyline up to WrestleMania 25. It's amazing. It's a great storyline. Um, watch it, and it it turns out to be really good. And anyways, I'm not gonna spoil it for you. I really want you guys to go and watch it. And then there's WrestleMania the next year, which was actually happened in Arizona, WrestleMania 26, where he wrestles Shawn Michaels again, but this time it's the streak versus career. So if Shawn Michaels win, he breaks the
Mm.
streak. If he loses, then he has to end his career. Some people were thinking at that time, like, okay, this is it. Like Shawn Michaels is going to break it. But it was more Shawn Michaels' time ready to go. And he was cool with it, ending it with Undertaker. He wanted to end it with him. And that's also a really good match. But if I had to say between the two, 25 is definitely the better, more exciting match for me.
No, for sure. I mean, I feel like we have to talk about the streak ending, right? Like I feel like that has to be part of our conversation because I know you obviously know more about Taker's history than I do. I've heard Taker went to other people before Lesnar ended and
Say
asked them if they wanted to, and they just couldn't.
say that one more time.
Yeah, I know. I think one of our Wi-Fi's is a little shoddy here, but um, if I'm if memory serves me correctly, Undertaker went to a few other people before Lesnar and asked them if they wanted to end his streak. Is that correct? Because
I
I
haven't
I
heard
heard
that.
that. Well, I heard he had went to Kurt Angle and Angle said I couldn't. I just couldn't do it.
That's true. Yes, that was brought up, and there's some wrestlers who absolutely refuse to break it. Kurt Angle being one of them, and then another one, Edge, when they face each other at
Mm.
WrestleMania. He was also another wrestler that refused to lose to, or I'm sorry, refused to beat the Undertaker at WrestleMania. He didn't want to be the one to break the streak.
I think it might have been. I think Randy Orton. He also asked Orton, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong there. I could be wrong, but I mean,
I mean,
how did you feel? How did you feel like out of all? Because in all honesty, in the ruthless aggression era, I mean, Lesnar was one of the best superstars in that era, if not the best. Like you could argue it, obviously, but like, and I know this was after the ruthless aggression era, but Lesnar already defined himself. That's where he defined himself as a wrestler in the ruthless aggression era, because he was kind of the guy that Vince wanted to make the face, and I know they're good friends, not good friends, but they're friends in real life, right? Lesnar and Mark the Undertaker, they're friends, correct?
yeah, I don't know if I would say they're friends, but I know like when they see each other, it's mutual respect. You know, everything's good. I could be totally wrong. They could be friends. Um, I know Taker's a very private person. Even to this day, he's really strictly towards like being with his family. But um, I know he has a lot of respect for Lesnar. I know that for sure.
So, like, out of all the wrestlers out there, and the reason I built Lesnar up is to kind of justify losing the streak to him. But do you think that there could have been a better, I don't want to say better, but I guess a more qualified wrestler to end the streak?
So okay, that's a really good thing. So just an FYI, in case everyone doesn't know, so the morning of WrestleMania 30, Taker was going over. He was supposed to win that match. And it was
Wow,
honestly,
I didn't even know that. I didn't know that.
yeah, he actually talks about it during his documentary. It's pretty fascinating when he actually starts explaining it. And I'm just reciting a lot of things from what I've watched recently in interviews and in documentaries and whatnot, because prior to this last year, no one knew a damn thing because he kept his character so private. He kept it so, you know, not in the spotlight, and that's what makes it now exciting because now we know kind of somewhat the details of what happened. But yeah, long story short, he was supposed to win that match, and he was scheduled to win that match up until a few hours later or a few hours before, and Vince went to his locker room, and Undertaker mentioned that Vince never goes to anyone's locker room. Usually, if Vince wants you, he'll have someone come and grab you, and you go to his office. And I'm just reciting the story. And he came into Mark's locker room and said, "Yep, I think Lesnar's going to go over tonight." And Taker has the absolute most respect for Vince. He sees him like somewhat of a father figure. That's his boss, and he understands this is his company. And he said, "Yeah, if that's what you want, boss, are you sure?" And to his point, he said, "Well, if it's not him, who else can break the streak?" And and that makes sense. Like I get it, but it's funny because in the recent interview he did with Stone Cold Steve Austin a few weeks ago, I was thinking the same exact thing when it happened, is that when he broke the streak, I said he doesn't need it. He's already a top tier superstar. He was completely dominant when he came back from UFC and destroyed everyone in sight. Like, he didn't necessarily need it. He was already up here amongst all the other superstars. I didn't think it was necessary. I don't think it was necessary. I think it should have been somewhat like an up and comer, someone who, built traction, someone who, was going to be the new face of the company. And Taker even admits that. And that's what would make sense for business. You're pretty much handing off to the next generation. And as some of you may know, he lost to Roman Reigns, WrestleMania a couple of years later. He thinks that's what it is when it should have happened, and then that would have been his actual farewell, to the wrestling industry. He loses the streak and then he retires after that point, and that should have been the plan. But I don't know. I personally wasn't happy with it. I love Brock Lesnar. I love when he comes and wrestles. He's money. As much as some people say, oh, he's not a wrestler. He's a part timer. He comes in here and there. Yeah, that's true. But he puts asses in seats, and because he's fun to watch because he's just a monster. He just, regardless what your weight is, he'll toss you around like a rag doll, and it's just entertaining. So, like I said, I don't think Lesnar was the right person to do it. I understand Vince's mindset of who else could have done it, and he's right. No one probably else could have done it besides Brock, but then they should have saved it for someone else who could have. That's just my opinion. And when Taker said that on a recent interview, I'm like, thank goodness I'm not the only one that thinks that, because I didn't think it was. And there's a lot of other people out there that think the same way, but I'm glad I wasn't the only one to think that, because after watching that, I'm like, shouldn't have been Lesnar. It should have been an up and comer. That's just my personal preference, though.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly would have only been okay with him losing the streak to a legend, or really just a legend, to be honest with you. Like, not even like would have done it for me, because it's like, all right, this dude, he was 21-0, right? He was 21-0 for losing to Lesnar. Okay, so to beat Undertaker at WrestleMania, you had to have been, and I understand there weren't a lot of legends at the time still, I mean, wrestling then. I mean, I would think like, but then, oh man, even then it's like, okay, so you're going to tell me someone's going to come out of retirement, maybe, to fight Undertaker and then beat Undertaker? Like, coming out of retirement to beat a legend's undefeated record, stupid. But then I think like, yeah, but an up and coming superstar, they're not qualified enough to beat him. So then I come back to your point. It's like, who else really could have done it?
So to that point, so the year prior, before he faced Brock Lesnar, he faced CM Punk at WrestleMania. And if CM Punk was probably the hottest wrestler at that time, because he recently just lost the title a few months prior before facing Taker, and he lost it to The Rock. He held the WWE Championship for 400 plus days, which was, I think at the time, which was the record for longest held, holding the WWE champion, obviously excluding back in the, 60s and 70s where, they held it for many, many years. But he was, I think, I would go on the record and say that he could have beaten the streak as well, because he did have traction. He did have some sort of resume behind him, and he faced Taker, a couple of years prior before, and lost the World Heavyweight Championship to Taker. So I think if you were going to do it for an up and comer, I think CM Punk would have been a good one, because that would elevate him to even surpass, him holding the championship. And, I think that put him on a different tier than everyone else on the roster. And then he would have been your face, and if it wasn't him, like I said, at the time when he did face Roman Reigns, 3 years, after he lost a streak, then it made sense To me, and Taker's, Taker's all about giving back to the business. And
Yeah.
by that, it means giving it to someone who's up and coming. So I agree with that. And I think it would have done a lot more to Roman Reigns' career than it would with Brock Lesnar. Just my opinion.
No, I could agree with that. I don't know. It would have been awesome if Taker would have stayed undefeated at WrestleMania. And I think if anyone would have had questions about him being the undoubted greatest of all time, that if he were to have stayed undefeated at WrestleMania, I don't even think there would have been a question the greatest of all time. And, just I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get to everything with this man. This man had a 30-year career, guys. But I mean, we talked about his legacy and just what he means and meant to the industry and some of his greatest matches. He's on Mount Rushmore. But Phil, before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you want to add on real quick?
All I'm going to mention is that, I thought he retired back when he lost to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. And, I accepted that. And, that was a huge bummer. And then he comes back and he defeats John Cena at the following WrestleMania, looks better than ever, had his hip surgery done. And it was like reliving that moment with Taker. So these last few years have been awesome, even though it's been very, very, very limited. Um, he was such a pivotal, part of my childhood, and, engraved in my memory, just because I was such a huge wrestling fan and such a huge fan of Taker. So as much as I'm extremely bummed, like this, I was watching Survivor Series when he actually retired. He made the comments that Undertaker will rest in peace, and pretty much, signing off as, as his character. But I'm happy for him. He needs it. He deserves it. The man's 55 years old. He's been doing this, like, his character is 30 years old, but he's been wrestling obviously longer than 30 years. So I
Yeah.
can only imagine what his body is, taking. He's mentioned how many surgeries he's had in his documentary. But yeah, the one thing I always remember as a kid, probably 8, 9, 10 years old, at my grandparents, getting excited to tune into SmackDown, you know, watching him wrestle and wrestling with my, toys, mimicking his moves. That's some of the stuff I always remember. And, you know, um, that's something I'll always love about that. How about you?
Yeah. You, you know, the last thing I will say, or the last action I will do is and sorry, I won't near as Taker. I can try. I can try. But yeah, rest in peace, Deadman. We will great legend and probably even a better person. Um
Yeah, I can't wait till
yeah,
he gets inducted
I'd
in
say
the
we
Hall of
just wrap
Fame.
this one up and oh, I know. And sure there's going to be an even better, there's probably going to be even more documentary so on his career. So I can't wait for it too. But hey guys, if you enjoyed it, like Phil said previously, comment down below on this video. Send us your questions, buffoonsportstalk@gmail.com, and also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and obviously YouTube.
Hell yeah. And we're going to kick things back up 2021. We'll definitely get things rolling up again with the whole circus, and we'll get rolling and rocking with sports and even other topics. Man, I mean, I think that's what's great about podcasting is that you can talk about sports because that's what our main podcast is about, but then you can talk about other stuff, wrestling for example. You can talk about, what's going on in the world. Like, it doesn't matter. We're open for anything really. So I think that's what's great about this. And if you enjoy it, like Troy mentioned, follow us, go to our social media platforms, type in Buffoon Sports Talk. You'll find us in all platforms, and, on YouTube, subscribe and turn on that notification button. So anytime the new videos drops, you'll get a notification.
Yep. Right on, man. Well, this was fun. Let us know what you guys think. I'm Troy Alexander, Phil Melandri, signing out.
Later, guys.